Dude, they were already coasting on the past 2 years ago. And then you fast forward to now, and they're only leaning on that weak strategy even more. It is not a long-term strategy. That's not what a long-term strategy looks like. They're not leaning on growth anymore. They're basically milking what they already have. They're sacrificing the future for today. Well, this is the strangest timeline for game consoles, I think. We have consoles that are appreciating in value instead of depreciating. Game consoles have almost become an asset, which is very weird to say. Now, the biggest problem with this is that they're basically wiping away one of the three main reasons that people choose to buy a console over buying or building a PC. Basically, you have the big three. You have affordability, you have exclusives, and you have convenience. Sony's leadership has effectively just removed arguably the biggest piece of the big three, affordability. And this price increase is fucking obscene. $650 for a base PS5, $600 for the digital model, and $900 for the PS5 Pro. Holy fuck. And look, like, I'm very plugged into the geopolitics and the macroeconomics of the current environment we find ourselves in. I understand all of it and why companies feel they have to make these decisions. Like, I do not envy them at all. The problem is that they are well on their way to basically erasing their entire value proposition. Obviously, I don't know what Sony's financial situation looks like. I'm not privy to the numbers. I haven't looked into it. And there's only so much I would know as, a shareholder anyway. But as like an armchair CEO here, limited by the amount of information, that position affords me, they're putting themselves in a position that they could never possibly recover from, in my opinion. PlayStation is far and away Sony's biggest source of revenue. It's something like 36%, when the next thing down the list is like 11%, which is Sony Music. Like, Sony can't afford to fuck this up. And I get that they're in a tough position, but this ain't it, bro. And what makes this like even more clear, I think, that in fiscal year 24, hardware sales were already declining. It was like a 6.5%, decrease, to be specific. Like, to compensate for that, they did up their services category. They saw growth of like 23%, which helped them at the time, obviously. The problem is, when PlayStations cost significantly less than they do now, they were already having a harder time selling them and needing to rely more and more on folks that already bought in, which is like you and me, right? Dude, they were already coasting on the past 2 years ago. And then you fast forward to now, and they're only leaning on that weak strategy even more. It is not a long-term strategy. That's not what a long-term strategy looks like. They're sacrificing the future for today. And dude, you could make a really strong argument against the exclusives component too, because Sony's big gamble on that giant live service push under Jim Ryan and subsequent realization that it was dumb as fuck and changing course, it's left the PS5 generation with no exclusive games at all, dude. And it's wild how, like, before the RAM crisis, we were hearing rumblings of the next gen being revealed next year or even coming out next year. And I remember hearing that and thinking, dude, this generation just started. Like, I've played nothing. But 2027 would be the normal length of a generation. That's 7 years. The PS5 came out in 2020. That blew my mind, mostly because I feel like I've played almost nothing on this console, at least exclusives, right? And it's become a third-party machine, basically, which is funny because I don't even play that many third-party games on it. I'm mostly playing them on my PC or on my Switch. And it's even more hilarious because Sony's whole comeback to being the biggest player on the market the last two generations, was because of its outstanding library of exclusive games. It's what brought you back in, right? Once again, they seem to have lost their way. And we saw how that went for them last time, right? It's clear for everyone to see that no matter how big of a lead that you have, no matter how dominant you are in the market, all of that can go away in no time at all with a few really crucial bad decisions. And then now that brings us to the last reason why someone would choose a console over the alternative, which is convenience. Now, that doesn't just mean convenience of a pre-made box that doesn't require tinkering for people that don't care for PCs, right? It's also the convenience of being able to easily choose this box over the others because that's where all your friends are playing. That's what's crazy is this choice has never been clearer in the last two generations, at least for Sony. The PS2 generation was, the GOAT in sales. We all know that. But there wasn't much online playing at the time for the most part. So there wasn't a whole component of one, choosing the one where your friends were playing. It didn't matter as much in that generation. And then in the Xbox 360 PS3 generation, Microsoft had a very clear lead, right? Which was huge because this is when, online play became pretty ubiquitous. But Sony came back at the end of that generation, practically matched Xbox in sales, which evened things out, right? Sony practically has no competition in this generation. Then we get to the PS4, PS5 generation, and Sony practically has no competition. They are on top of the world, right, in the console race. The choice should be incredibly clear. You buy blue, and that's where your friends are. That's why you do it. But by pricing out most of the new folks now for the rest of this generation, and presumably it coming up now means next generation is going to be even worse. Imagine what it's going to cost for the next generation. It's going to be fucking crazy. But, by pricing out these new folks, you're shooting yourself in the foot from now moving forward. This leaves PlayStation in a really fucking weird spot, to be honest. Their entire value proposition is wiped out. And all they're left with is trading on past relevance, coasting on that past reputation. But as we've seen in the past generations, that doesn't last long. In so many ways, they're making similar mistakes to that PS3 generation. Different, but similar in essence. They're overconfident. What happens when you don't have enough on offer and you push the customer too far financially? Do they really think people will just stick around once they realize that all the reasons that they chose PlayStation again this generation before are gone? And now that the Switch 2 is around, right? Now that Nintendo is a consistent home for new third-party games on release, now that the Switch 2 is relevant enough in performance too, now that, for now, the Switch 2 is $200 fucking less than that base PS5 with the disc drive. Will people still be interested in the PS5? I don't know after this change. On top of all that, the Switch 2 is also a handheld. Now, if you kind of wanted an equivalent experience to what the Switch 2 offers, you would need the PS Portal and, the digital PS5 or the base PS5. That's $850 or $900, same price as the new fucking price for the PS5 Pro. That's crazy compared to $450. What? Even if they bumped the price on the Switch 2, if you still wanted both of those elements, the handheld and the, home console, same situation. It's still way too expensive. And dude, I use my Switch 2 on a daily basis. I play like lots of 2D games, lots of Metroidvanias, Blueprints. I don't usually play the big, third-party games. Those I'll come over to my PC for. The only reason that I turn on my PS5 these days is for those first-party games, which there are almost none of. The last time I turned it on was for Ghost of Yotei, which was relatively recent, but before that, I can't even remember the last time I used it. Probably for some third-party game that I already owned on the console from earlier in the generation. The consumers in the US and abroad too are in a tough spot. I'm from California, but I live in Europe now, so I kind of get this unique perspective from both sides on that. If they can even afford this hobby at all anymore, why wouldn't they just choose the more affordable option, especially when it competes so well with the more expensive one? That Switch 2 is sure looking appealing. Yeah, dude. The market is in such a weird place now. I'm really interested to see where this all goes because it can't end well. This is getting so expensive. All of these people are getting priced out. It's crazy, dude. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to watch. That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. I know your time's valuable, so thank you for spending it with me. And I will catch you in the next one. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a like. If you disliked it, make sure to dislike it. And if you like shit like this and want to see more of it, subscriptions are always great. I'd appreciate a sub. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you next time.